Okay, welcome back. Before we jump into the next topic, I want to just point out one thing about one additional aspect about zooming. And we're in the audio editor here, and that is that there's actually a zoom tool tab in the ribbon. And I'm just going to hover around and call up the different tools here. You've got things like a microscope tool, but you've got a lot of zoom tools in the ribbon as well, in addition to the on-screen controls we looked at before, including this zoom tool. And you've got all kinds of ability to come in to look at specific regions and stuff, as well as jumping backwards to the last zoom level, forwards to the one you just had, zooming vertically and horizontally, and so forth. So you've got the ability to jump into a predefined decibel level and so on. So you also have these tools to navigate, as well as the ability to click and drag in the decibel or level rulers to change the visual size of the waveform, just to make it a little bit easier to see. So before we move on, just point those out. Now, I had said in the first chapter, the introduction to the course, that if you're new to wavelab, it can feel slippery and frustrating. And that's what we're going to look at here. There are so many functions baked into cursor position that if you're anything less than an expert user, you'll pull your hair out for the first couple of days trying to use the program, because it often won't do what you would expect it to do if you're coming from a user interface with less sophistication. So we're in the audio editor here with the two views of the same waveform as we looked at before, and the ability to change the level on one, move one around and not the other. I want you to keep a real sharp eye on the cursor throughout this section of the course. And in fact, I'm going to make the cursor almost comically large a few times so that you can get a better look at it. But if you'll notice, the I bar when I hover over the top display here shows a magnifying glass. But if I move it to the lower display, that magnifying glass goes away, and I'll have to zoom in really close. But at the moment, you'll see there's a superscript L next to it. And actually, the theme is so dark here. I'm going to zoom in to get one of these blue waveforms really big so we can get a little better background here. Okay, as I take the I bar from the top display to the bottom, you'll notice the superscript L, then the L drops off for a while, and then it's replaced by an R. And just, the only thing changing that is where you are on the display. So if you're up here in the top display and you click and drag, you're going to activate the zoom tool, and that's going to change the lower display to match whatever you've selected on the top. And that happens regardless of whether the double arrowhead, the synchronization arrows, are clicked in either side. If I come down below, most of the time I'm going to use the cursor to click and drag and make a selection of both channels. But if I move up to the top of the waveform where that superscript L appears and drag, I'm going to get only the left waveform or only the right waveform. And if you're not aware of those conventions, it can be very frustrating, because you're trying to grab the whole thing. And, well, now I'm only getting one channel. Well, I'll grab up here because they're easier to get a hold of. Well, now I'm not getting anything. Well, wait a minute. Why? It's very frustrating. People jump all over the place. So it's all in the wrist. A little bit of subtlety on the cursor location goes a long way. Now, here's another one that will put these back to a more reasonable value now. Another one that can throw you off is you make a selection, and you think, okay, I want to move that. In an awful lot of workstations, you would click and drag to make this go someplace else. Notice that now with a selection made, the I bar shows what looks like a black and white two documents next to it. That's supposed to represent copying. If you click and drag now, it's going to duplicate a copy. And that's also going to be channel specific. You can make a copy of just that channel, or a copy of just this portion of this channel, and drag it over and so forth, which is very handy. You don't have to go get modifier tools or hold down any other keys and stuff. But again, if you don't know that that's going to happen, you can just drive you nuts. The other thing I would point out is in the audio editor here, and let me use, we've got some undo tools up here at the top where you can use the Control Z. One thing that you're not really configured to do here is move audio around. If I want, say, this portion of music to start sooner, really what I'm going to have to do is select the stuff upstream of it and hit delete, and that'll pull it up. I can take a section of audio and use Command C to copy and then Command V to paste. But that duplicate command is actually going to be a little bit faster way to do that. But this is this mode, the audio editor, is much more for going in and tweaking, not for arranging. We'll look at that in the, when we jump over here into the audio montage. Just to point out, you see the red color at the top of both this tab group and the montage and the editor here. That, again, like the asterisk, is telling you these have been modified, not saved. The green ones have been fully saved. And what we're going to be able to do in the audio editor waveform editing is what this is really about, not so much arranging. Now, the other thing I'll point out is that this whole program is very context menu sensitive. So as you make a selection, as you're getting to know the program, right click on everything. There's context menus everywhere for all kinds of different capabilities, to include things like here. If we take we zoom in on that, again, we're zooming in the top, selecting in the bottom. I right click. I have the option here to get a cleaner take on that. If we're going to copy that to a new window, make a duplicate version, and boom, that piece of audio now pops up here in a tab added to this, a window added to this tab group. And if we don't want that, you can just delete it, and it'll go. If you delete it and take the right option, it'll go back away. Another place where you'll see this is you can right-click on your rulers to call up different formats and stuff. Right-click on the volume ruler to get different settings there and so forth. Now let's jump over to the audio montage and look at this same phenomena. And I'm going to click in the ruler here to move the red cursor around. And let me show you something. Let me zoom in just a little bit tighter on this so you can get a little better look at it. I'm going to put the cursor down on the ruler at that point. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to move my mouse vertically down this position, and you're going to see that you get the double-headed arrow here to position the ruler. As I move down, it suddenly becomes a scissors tool. Then it becomes an I-bar. Then it becomes a vertical arrow. Then it becomes a four-way arrow again. And then if I hover over the letters here, it becomes an effect tool. So let me put the cursor right over the tag at the bottom there and watch again. From top to bottom, it's going to cycle through 7 different modes just based on where the cursor is over the audio selection there. And again, if you're not aware of these functionalities, it's going to be very, very frustrating. So let's look at what each one of those are real quick. Obviously, when you're given the double-headed arrow there, it's a positioning tool. And specifically, here's what I want to point out. There's one other that it'll do at the end here. It'll change to this thing. If I want to move this piece of audio around, and that's largely what you're doing in the audio montage mode, you're going to try to think, oh, I'll click and drag it. And you'll end up with a selection. You go, dang it, no, I want to move this over. So I'll click and drag from the end. And well, now we're not moving it either. It's cropping. And now suddenly it moves, and then here it won't move again. And that's all down to cursor position. And we have the same combination of multifunction based on cursor location. So to move a piece of audio here, you want to position the cursor just below the center line to where you get the double-headed arrow. And now you can move it both laterally and vertically to different tracks. You'll notice it's jumping over track 2 there because it's a stereo waveform and track 2 is a mono wave. So it's not compatible with that. The rest of the time when the I-bar, the cursor is an I-bar, it's a selection tool. And here again, after we've made a selection, if we hover over it, we get the duplicate icon and click and drag. This time it's going to ask you some more questions. So we can take a section of this, we can drop it on another waveform and mix them together and so forth. Or we can drag it out to the side and we can shift everything else around it and so forth, or just ignore it. The hovering over the cursor gives you the scissor tool, which is, as you would expect, a split function. If you click, nothing happens. And wait a minute, I wanted to split this. And you'll probably end up here using the split tool going there. That's what I wanted. I wanted to split it. The key is you've got to double click to make that happen. And here again, you're going to see that it'll be channel specific based on your position. As you saw, if you hover over the end of a clip, you've activated a cropping tool. And if there's more waveform underneath there, it'll expose it to our split point in this case. Otherwise, it'll crop it back. And then the the other tool you saw in the middle here is a envelope adjustment. Now, in its default view, if you're familiar with working with clips in Cubase, you're familiar with the fact that you can grab the hotspot for volume and change the volume of a clip, and you can do fade handles and so forth. That's pretty standard. But what's really going on here is slightly more complex. Wavelab has an entire suite of envelope tools, and that's how you're going to do a lot of things that you would normally think of as an automated process. And just briefly, let's jump over here to the envelope tab and take a look at that. You can see at the moment the envelope is set to volume and fade, but I can also select pan. And if I move to the pan control, now as I move this up and down, you can see one side becoming louder and the other side softer based on its pan laws. Actually, you can adjust that right here if you want equal power, constant power, boost one and drop the other and so forth. Whatever's appropriate to your application. And here again, you have the option to tilt it up at one end, down at the other. And if I double click on that line, I'm going to get more nodes. So I can cause that envelope to change and the panning to change over time, which is effectively automation. And we'll see that in just a moment how this applies to effects and so forth as well. But again, if you're not familiar with, it's not immediately obvious that that's how you would go about making these adjustments, and it can be frustrating if you don't know what's there. As long as we're in the envelope tab, we've got the option here for smoothing, which will make this more of a Bezier curve and give you a little more subtlety in how the effect is applied. And in this case, remember, we're looking at panning. If I switch this back to the volume view, same rules apply. I can create more nodes in the middle and do other stuff with those chunks, moving them around and so forth, and curve them to whatever is appropriate. Then the other kind of funky control we looked at here, if I bring my cursor down and I hover over the title block, it calls up the tooltip for an effect window. You click on that, and here you can add an effect right to the clip. It's going to give you this shortcut to your plug-in navigation. So if I take something like a basic reverb like RoomWorks SE, and that's now going to be applied to this clip, and it opens up the user interface for that so that you can come down and load your presets and so on. There's the kitchen. We'll put the kitchen on there. And now to have a little more control over that effect, we need to call up our effects tool window, which is missing. We actually closed that one out in the window handling demonstration previously. But no problem. We open the tool window menu, come down to effects. It'll pop out as a free floating window. And as soon as I begin to move it, it'll start giving me options for where to dock it. I want to put it back in this tab group where we got it from in the last chapter. All right, and there we go. And with the effects tab open, you're going to see we have 3 levels we can analyze there: clip, track, and output. We're working at the clip level. That's green because we just added an effect. And if we come into the routing, the default position is going to be an insert. So it would apply that reverb across the entire track. We actually want to do a blend, what they call blend wet into dry. Any other application in the world would call this a send effect. And then we can open the editing envelope here. And now the bar in the center of that clip is going to be controlling the level of the reverb effect over time. So if we want the reverb to come in beginning to end, if we want it to go up and down, that sort of thing. And we're still on the envelope tab down here. I'll point out that as we open that up now, we have access to volume, fades, pan, and that effect. And the more things that you placed on this clip, the more options you would have in that envelope, which is really Wavelab's approach to automation. And one other thing, if you're not seeing this central bar in any of your clips, you may have the hide all option turned on, which would be beneficial if you're just trying to clean up your display, or you want to eliminate one of those 7 things that your cursor can turn into here as you're moving around. Okay, back to getting to know the user interface here. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of stuff buried that would normally seem to be more primary, like adding tracks and things. We looked at briefly before. If you click on the track number, you get all of these options in terms of routing, locking, height set. If you want to move the tracks up and down on the display, basically all of your track handling stuff is going to be in there, including a picture track, which is kind of an interesting feature. It's more for visually landmarking where you're working as opposed to any sort of video output, but it's there. And then these the collapse arrows will clean things up by making those shorter. That arrow's grayed out if you only have the one track. And of course, the mute and solo options there. Then here too, we have the ability to add effects to the track. And again, in the world of Pro Tools or Cubase or something, effects are just front and center on everything. Here they're sort of a miniature button way off to one side. But you'll see on this track 1, there's 0 effects in there at the moment. That's what that means. If you click on that, it's going to call up that same add effect dialog, and you can pop in here and put whatever you want on it. And now you'll see that we'll drop in whatever factory preset's convenient, put that away. And now we can see there's stuff active on the clip level, and now we have on the track level. And again, you've got all of your routing options and everything right there. And then you could do output as well. And this output effect is prior to the master section. And there's a chapter coming up that deals with effects in more detail. But the point here is that there's a lot of stuff hidden in the drop-down menus. You've got a lot of stuff hidden in context menus. But more than anything else, location. Where your cursor is located on the screen is going to be vital to what functionality it's performing at any given time. Now, the only other topic that we didn't really touch on in terms of overall concept and user interface is that of these tab groups. And up until now, we've just been working with this one tab group called the tour group. And I've taken the liberty of putting a sample of each of the 7 products in there. But you can add as many file groups as you'd like along here. And the whole idea with a file group, it's almost a smart folder. Because Cubase can do so many different things, and some of them are related, the file group concept allows you to take all the sorts of the disparate pieces that belong together and work with them sort of in one chunk there. So if we say, let's say we were going to create an audio montage for a CD. And again, we've gotten a workspace here. We would go up to our project manager, our file browser, and we would pull in the clips that we want to use. And it's mad at me because those are all mono clips, and I created a stereo track. Hold on, I can fix that. Let's add a mono track and see if that works any better. Drag those in. Try this again. Ta-da! So now we would have all of our clips for our CD there. And rather than have to shut all this down and then open up the CD thing and begin working over there, we can now create a new, basic audio CD here. Dang it, sorry. Back to that file group. Come to our File tab, select New Basic Audio CD, and it's going to create a file group for that too. We've got a lot of red going on here. Let me just call up the Info tab and give this a name. We'll call it Quick CD Content. All right. Go back to our View tab, jump over, and we'll call this Quick CD Project. All right, and that's probably enough to get the concept across here. And if we hit Control S, save those, now you'll see the asterisks and the red disappeared from this file group. And I guess the last thing we should probably do here is rename this, Sample CD Project. Okay, so all of the stuff associated with this sample CD, which is our audio content, and then once we get this done, we would move it over to the CD itself. And that's all being handled as one chunk, and I can open and close that as a group, and it'll be removed from our current project. And this one over here, let me go ahead and save this stuff, get rid of those red tabs and so forth. So that's the basic file group concept, is that anything that's associated with your overall project can be grouped and handled as one bundle of stuff. And I would also point out, along those same lines, if we come back here and, well, let's just do it this way. We'll if we create a new file group, you have the option to do a single display here, like you've been seeing, but you can also create file groups with multiple window configurations. And this can be real handy for drag and drop operations. So again, if we wanted to add up here our new, we've got audio files up there, and we've got a new montage that we're going to put in here. Just hit create real quick, and then we'll put maybe our CD down there. This now gives us not only our audio editor here, our montage there, and the CD project here. Not only are they held under one file group, which is a handy container, they're displayed simultaneously. So when you're dragging and dropping files from one to the other, you can do that very quickly. And when we're going to do a whole chapter on how to create a basic and a more advanced CD, and we'll execute all those for you at that time. But the other aspects of this to keep in mind are that everything can be resized. You can break windows out, hide them, move them to other monitors, that sort of thing. If you want to clean stuff up, very flexible. And the other option you have here for all this basic high-level user interface stuff is the workspace concept. You can set up multiple presets. You can go back to the default layout. You can go to a variety of different configurations depending on what your workstation looks like, and set up your control windows to load them up with whatever stuff you want to put in them, and then say if those two displays are critical to you, you can put it back where it was, start again, bring it over here, put it across there. If that's a particularly vital display, your oscilloscope and your time code, and then drag the whole thing off to a second monitor over here. All of those are options to you. And once you have all that stuff laid out the way you want it, you can store them as your own presets and so forth. So if you end up with one set of windows and meters and everything that's perfect for putting together a CD, and then another one that works much better for podcasting, be sure to come up to your workspace window and save those, and then you can recall them. It's basic, so you give it whatever name you want here, and save it, and then that'll be available to you in the future to go back to. So you can go back to, say this is our 2-window setup with Wavescope, and I can go back to that basic setup with a click of a button, and then back to the default at any time. So you can always get back to your default window with that. It comes baked in, so don't be afraid to play with moving stuff around, and if it gets too funky or you lose stuff, just go back to your default and you'll be set. So with that in mind, I think we're done with the majority of the kind of long-winded academics, and we'll start looking at some examples about how to use all these tools and get on down the road.